It's time to add a background to your illustration. Here's your chance to give your foreground a place to exist. You're almost done with your project. This is just about the last step. You can see this one so far. I started with an original template. I went and traced the black lines and details on that. I created a color layer underneath that. I used a couple of different techniques to create highlights and shadows on that. Want you to see the entire project on this PDF. So all of these steps I've gone through, except for the ones at the bottom. It says create a background layer behind your foreground subject. Draw new paths with strokes and shapes to establish a setting for your foreground art. So pretty cool. Going over to here. And basically you can look at this step as a repeat of a lot of the processes that you've done so far. You can use all the layers that you have to your advantage, and you can use all of the processes, all of the tricks that you've done so far to create something that goes behind the rest of your subject. I'll get started with that, and by that I will create a new layer behind here. Probably actually going to make 2 layers so that I can name this one that one the background, and this I'm going to name background template. Now you could draw your entire background by yourself if you wanted to, freehand. This one I'm going to put in another picture, kind of like the template image that I used for the foreground subject, except this one's going to be, I'm probably not going to follow this one as closely. You need to realize this before you get too far. I'll turn off the original template. Anything that you see in your project that's white, that you did not make a fill for, is probably transparent. And it helps to go to view and show the transparency grid. Probably need to turn that one off. So I can see now that even those eyes that I have there are not transparent. A lot of times kids have problems if they have white details in their project. Sometimes they just leave those because they can see the white behind it. If you didn't paint it, if you didn't make a fill for that, it's probably not actually white. So this is a good way to check it out. At this point, I probably don't need any of these layers. So I'll just make them invisible. I'm working in the very bottom layer. It says BG template. And I'll go File and Place. And I already found an image online. And I think this one will work pretty well. So I know where it is. It's right here. I might have to go in and resize that a little bit. And I'm not worried about making it super incredibly accurate. So maybe I'll even change the angle of this before I start going. Really just need an idea. I think I'll zoom in a little bit on it too. So this looks like our foreground character could be hanging out in this area. Make it fill up the artboard. I think that looks pretty good. So I'll go in and double click on this and turn it into a template. It's going to dim down just like I did before. It's kind of like a review. I'll work in this layer and I'm going to just start roughly drawing some of this stuff. I think I'll use a gradient. Right now, I'll be using the pen tool. If I go over the outsides of the artboards, it's not a big deal. And if I'm doing this a little bit gestural, it's not 100% exact with the original art, it's not a big deal either. You're the artist on this. And if I do something that doesn't look like it's in the right order, I'll just move it to the background. I think that'll work fine for some of that. So I'm working pretty fast on this. Your level of detail might be different depending on what your drawing is about or what is in there, what the subject is. I would tend to say that your background can easily be a lot less detailed than your foreground if you want it to be. So I'm doing kind of a couple of layers of skyline here and being pretty gestural about it, not doing a whole lot of detail. Some of these I might make a little bit different fill too. So here's one. I'm going to just make a copy of this one. I'll put these two together using my Pathfinder, now I have a symmetrical object. Might use my eyedropper tool and choose a color from that background for some of this stuff. I think the last thing I'll do in my background is make a shape that fills up the entire rest of the background. We choose a color out of the sky and put it in the very back of that layer. So if you think about where the artboards are on this, and you think about all the stuff that's inside the artboards, that's all we're really going to see. I'll go back in and put all of the important parts back into the foreground. And there you go. Maybe that's a pretty good finished drawing. Might want to do some effects on the background, but at this point, if you got about here, you'd be ready to do the very last step, which is saving and exporting your project. I'll give you some further information on that before it's time to be done. I spent some time after class adding some more details and other effects to my background. I blurred it out, kind of like I showed you making the soft highlight technique, and just did some other things to round out my background before I was done. Thanks for listening.